So I'm just going to make sure that we start off with a few facts. So a couple of facts that we need to make clear for everyone is that, number one, Director Christopher Wray, when he was appointed to be the head of the FBI, was appointed by Donald Trump. Now, I will agree that I definitely take issue with a number of decisions that Donald Trump makes, especially when it comes to the people that he decides to appoint to very important positions, including this one, because I did have to make sure that I wasn't going crazy. But when I say that you are the least qualified FBI director in the history of the FBI, that is real, because you are the only one that never even served with the FBI prior to joining, yet we are supposed to believe that you are the greatest thing since sliced bread. I didn't ask you a question. Now, what I want to go through is to talk about why you are a failure and why, honestly, we just need to tell you bye-bye. I know that you got a little upset and you put on your show for your boss because it seems like you're trying to save your job when it came to talking to Senator Booker yesterday. But let's go through some of your failures. So before you were even confirmed, and I think one of my colleague from Georgia, pointed out that you are already targeting career officials so that you could direct illegal firings. Mind you, these cases that you were so upset about, which are the ones tied to Trump, the cases came through his handpicked FBI director. And frankly, when people sit around and say things like, oh, you know, we're happy because now we feel safe. I don't know who feels safe in this country except for the white supremacists, because I specifically as a black woman definitely don't feel safe. And frankly, my colleagues have been real nice to you today, and I applaud them, but I don't have the same demeanor because I know that multiple colleagues on this side of the aisle have faced death threats. In fact, somebody tried to kill one of my colleagues. And frankly, I don't know if this FBI or under your leadership, if those people would have been caught. I don't have any confidence in you. And if we start talking about the reasons that I lack confidence, we could start with you not just wanting to acknowledge some simple facts. Simple facts like the vast majority of the threats are coming from right-wing extremism. And I know my colleagues have tried to stress this, but I decided that I would maybe do it in a different way. Number one, I have a couple of UCs. Kim Buck, one of multiple Republicans receiving death threats for voting against Jim Jordan as House Speaker.
Without objection.
Another one, Republican lawmaker says she received death threats after voting against Jim Jordan in Speaker's race.
Without objection.
In addition, there was another one from another colleague who now is leaving Congress because they said that they were calling his wife anonymously and threatening her life to the extent that she ended up sleeping with a firearm.
Without objection.
Okay, so here's the deal. How are we supposed to have confidence when you're sitting up here telling the Senate yesterday that it will take you 14 years before you can get the FBI fully staffed to do their jobs? You're also now redirecting resources so that they can go and play ICE agents on the streets. You're getting rid of your most qualified people, and even when it came down to somebody that you consider to be a friend, you were posted up having some fancy dinner to the extent that you posted not only once erroneously, you posted twice erroneously as it relates to catching somebody, and then you want to go and say, let me take a victory lap. Because honestly, if it wasn't for parents deciding that they were going to turn in their child, it seems like y'all wouldn't have got there, even though he literally confessed online. So I'm confused about what it is that the FBI is doing except for trying to put on a show for the apprentice or whatever you want to call him. The day after all of this took place, there was domestic terrorism that was taking place at HBCUs. They were targeted. Yet I didn't hear anything from the FBI about what was going on. And again, black people kept saying, how did we end up in this? Because the numbers are so very clear that white supremacy is a problem. And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're going to do anything about the white supremacy problem. The one that is leading to children being killed, children being shot, as well as members of their community as they're worshiping in their churches.
The time of the gentlelady has expired. If the gentleman would like to respond to any of that. Well, I mean, I'll respond. Kash Patel, as I said when I introduced him, public defender, former prosecutor, top staffer on the House Intelligence Committee, Deputy Director of National Intelligence with the National Security Council, Chief of Staff at the Department of Defense, and FBI Director. I think that's a pretty good resume for the guy who's now running the top law enforcement agency in our country, and we've seen all the stats that he's given to the committee on how much better they're doing at getting the bad guys than the previous guy was doing. With that, I recognize the gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, I think you're witnessing some auditions, clickbait auditions for the Academy Award for my Democratic colleagues. We'll see how they fare as they're on MSNBC later on today. But do you care, before I launch into my line of questioning, to respond to Ms. Crockett from Texas on that very elaborate and theatric display?
Here's what I've learned in my government service. I don't give a damn what they say about me as long as I'm succeeding in the mission. We're succeeding in the mission because the men and women of the FBI have never been empowered to do more work and to hit the streets harder than by President Trump's authorities and resources he's given us. And so all I care about is that we are capturing more child predators than ever before, taking more drugs off the streets than ever before, that we are capturing murderers at a significantly historic rate, and we're delivering this country the lowest murder rate in recorded history. That are facts that you cannot dispute. But you can come at me all you want. I don't care.
Thank you, Director, for that, and we appreciate your service. We appreciate the results speak for themselves, I think, pretty plainly, and your commitment not only to results, but to transparency, so we do appreciate that.
So if I tell you it's 72 degrees outside, we can just look at a thermometer and agree, right?
Right, yeah, it's an objective fact.
Exactly. But what happens when we try to measure something like public safety? Today, we are doing a deep dive into a really polarized congressional hearing featuring FBI Director Kash Patel.
Yeah, and looking at the raw transcript, which, by the way, is heavily partisan on both the left and the right, it is clear that the thermometer of public trust is just completely shattered.
Completely. And just to be totally clear to you, the listener, we are not here to take a political side. We are impartially reporting the facts of this exchange.
Right.
We just want to unpack the mechanics of this friction, without endorsing either side's viewpoints. We're just exploring the ideas presented.
Yeah, and there is a lot of friction to unpack here.
Yeah.
I mean, we are looking at a fundamental breakdown in how the government even defines law enforcement in the modern era.
FBI?
Yeah, get heated fast.
So Representative Jasmine Crockett, she's a Democrat from Texas. She goes straight at Director Patel and calls him the least qualified director in history. Because her whole argument hinges on the fact that he has zero prior experience actually serving inside the FBI.
Right, but in response to that, the committee chairman defends Patel by, completely redefining what qualified even means in this context.
Oh, so?
Well, he lists Patel's extensive alternative government resume. So he is a public defender, a federal prosecutor, top staffer on the House Intelligence Committee.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Deputy Director of National Intelligence and Chief of Staff of the Department of Defense. So it is a massive list of federal and security experience.
Okay, so, I get that he has a really heavy-hitting administrative resume, but it's almost like, hiring a hospital CEO who has written major health policy, worked in federal defense, maybe managed a supply chain.
Right.
But they've never actually walked the floor as a doctor. Let me push back a bit, though. If he is a capable executive, why does Congress care so much that he's never, personally arrested anyone? Does lacking that specific badge-carrying experience really change how the agency runs day to day?
Oh, it absolutely changes the mechanics of the agency.
Yeah.
Because, the FBI operates in a very entrenched internal culture.
Okay.
It's built almost entirely around the perspective of the field agent. So when an insider gets promoted to director, they usually preserve the existing hierarchy of threats.
Because they know how the plumbing works.
Exactly. They know the internal plumbing and what the rank and file prioritize. But when you bring in a complete outsider, especially one from the political sphere, they just don't have that institutional loyalty.
Right.
So they're much more likely to aggressively reroute the agency's resources. And, one side sees that as a necessary disruption to an insulated bureaucracy.
But the other side sees it as a dangerous vulnerability.
Right, one that makes the agency easily politicized.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Like, if an outsider comes in and reroutes the plumbing, you're naturally going to have a massive fight over where the water is flowing.
Yeah, inevitably.
Which explains the next major clash in this transcript.
Mm-hmm.
Because Patel doesn't have that traditional FBI background, Representative Crockett argues he's fundamentally shifting the agency's primary mission. She claims the FBI is now actively ignoring right-wing extremism and white supremacy.
And she backs that up with very specific examples. She cites unaddressed domestic terrorism threats that were targeting an HBCU, a historically black college or university.
Right.
And she even points to death threats made against Republican lawmakers, specifically for voting against Jim Jordan for House Speaker.
Wait, really?
Yeah, she heavily criticizes Patel for taking FBI resources and basically using them to act like border enforcement ICE agents on the streets rather than focusing on domestic extremism.
But looking at the transcript, the GOP representatives in the room, they completely brush that off, right? Like, they call her arguments theatrical MSNBC clickbait.
Yeah, they just dismiss it entirely.
And Director Patel himself bluntly says he doesn't give a damn about the criticism. He claims the agency is succeeding, and he points to record-breaking captures of child predators, massive drug seizures, and catching murderers.
Right.
Which he claims has led to the lowest murder rate in recorded history.
But notice how the mechanics of this argument actually work. Patel isn't necessarily refuting Crockett's specific claims about HBCUs or domestic extremism.
No, he's talking about completely different things.
Exactly. He is substituting her metrics of success with his own. He's saying, look at these aggregate national numbers on drugs and murder.
It's like one side is grading a math test and the other side is grading a history paper.
That is a perfect analogy.
But wait, if I'm just a regular person, listening to this, trying to understand if the FBI is actually doing a good job, how am I supposed to make sense of this? They aren't even taking the same test.
Well, you've hit on the core mechanism of the dysfunction here. When one faction defines success strictly by the prosecution of domestic extremism and civil rights protection,
right,
and the other defines it by aggregate national murder rates and border-related enforcement, there's just no shared scorecard.
So they aren't just arguing over how well the FBI is performing.
No, they are fundamentally disagreeing on what the primary threat to the country actually is.
Wow. So the underlying threat that you fear most dictates which set of facts you even value.
Exactly.
Which changes everything about how we look at public safety. It's no longer a shared objective metric you can just read on a thermometer. It's entirely subjective.
Yeah, the data you choose to highlight depends entirely on the narrative of safety you subscribe to.
That leaves us with a pretty heavy question for you to mull over.
Yeah.
If the very definition of what makes a country safe changes entirely depending on your political affiliation, is it even possible for a modern law enforcement agency to ever be viewed as successful by the entire public?